DUI and DWI laws, penalties, and consequences, impaired driving, Part 1. It has been demonstrated that drinking alcohol has both physical and mental impacts that make it more likely that someone may be engaged in a fatal collision if they choose to drive while intoxicated. National collision data show that alcohol impairment may be a factor in about 1/3 of all fatal road accidents, reflecting this elevated risk. Every state has severe regulations against driving while drunk in an effort to reduce the number of alcohol-related fatalities on our roads. To discourage drunk drivers from using a vehicle, laws against drinking and driving carry harsh penalties. There is still a long way to go in the fight against drunk driving and the enforcement of alcohol regulations. Anti-drinking regulations, according to recent studies, only make up a minor portion of the solution. Enhancing public awareness of alcohol use and limiting alcohol use across the country are essential to reducing the epidemic of drunk driving. It would appear that the threat of harsh punishment is not always sufficient to deter drunk drivers. Additionally, it has been challenging to catch and convict drunk drivers up until recently. How exactly do we define intoxication to begin with? Although they are quite similar, each state has its own legal definition of intoxication. California. If your mental and/or physical faculties are impaired to such a degree that you no longer have the ability to drive with the prudence characteristic of a sober person, you are considered to be inebriated in California. According to Texas law, intoxication is defined as not having the normal use of one's mental or physical faculties due to the ingestion of alcohol, a prohibited substance, a drug, a dangerous drug, a combination of two or more of those substances, or any other substances. Before the invention of blood alcohol tests and the imposition of the legal blood alcohol limit, many drunk drivers were exempt from punishment if they did not exhibit overt signs of being intoxicated, as that term is defined in statutory definitions. Now, whether the subject appears to be impaired or not, a blood alcohol content, BAC, of 0.08% or greater legally qualifies as inebriated. Per se alcohol-related traffic law. Every state has enacted legislation stating that if a person's blood alcohol level is 0.08% or more, they are automatically considered to be intoxicated regardless of their actions or conduct. The term per se legislation refers to this since it means intrinsically or in and of itself. Simply put, a BAC of 0.08% is the only requirement for a conviction of driving while intoxicated. Additional proof of drunkenness is not needed. Most people are unaware that even if their blood alcohol content, BAC, is below this limit, they can still be found guilty of driving while drunk. The regulations against drinking and driving in place today are made to make it impossible for offenders to flee the law. If either of the following conditions holds true, you may be charged with drunk driving. Your BAC is at least 0.08%. According to state law, you are exhibiting symptoms of intoxication from drugs or alcohol. BAC analysis. The police officer who initially stopped you will be present at your trial to testify about your condition if you are charged with drunk driving. They will discuss what led to their initial decision to stop you, how you behaved along the road, and the results of any field sobriety tests they use to assess your level of intoxication. When a police officer suspects you of operating a vehicle while drunk, he or she will either conduct a breath test at the scene or a blood or urine test back at the police station to determine your blood alcohol content. The officer's evidence on your physical and mental impairment will not be necessary to convict you if the results indicate that your BAC is 0.08% or above. But the judge will consider that when determining how severely to sentence you for the offense. Punishments for driving while inebriated. According to statutory law, each offense has a variety of potential punishments that the deciding court may choose from based on the specifics of the case. The following elements will be taken into account when deciding on a sentence for driving while intoxicated. Whether there were any injuries or fatalities. Whether any harm to the environment was done. If the suspect gave in to arrest attempts or resisted. How high the offender's blood alcohol content was, or how ill they were physically and/or mentally. Whether the offender has a criminal history for DUI or other offenses of a similar nature. Overall, be aware that driving while intoxicated will likely result in a hefty fine, potential jail time, and instant license suspension. You may receive a term of up to 10 years in jail if you are found guilty of intoxication assault, injuring another person while driving under the influence. You may receive a punishment of up to 20 years for intoxication manslaughter if you cause someone's death. Suspension of driver's license for DUI. It can take a very long time for you to be able to drive again if you are caught operating a vehicle while intoxicated. When a DWI conviction carries both license suspension and jail time, as it frequently does, the license suspension won't start until the offender has completed their jail sentence. DUI and DWI laws, penalties, and consequences, impaired driving, Part 2. Restrictions on driving permits. Your driver's license will almost certainly be suspended or, in the case of recurrent infractions, permanently terminated when you are found guilty of drunk driving. However, there are rare situations in which an offender can be permitted to keep their driving privileges as long as they follow specific guidelines. Interlock ignition device. If their vehicle is equipped with an ignition interlock device, a driver whose license has been suspended due to a DWI conviction may be able to apply for a restricted license, IID. To regulate when the car will start, this device is fitted in the ignition system. The driver must blow into the ED to provide a blood alcohol content reading before starting the engine. The car won't start if the driver's BAC is above a predetermined threshold. This is typically lower than the standard 0.08% limit. Remember that ignition interlock systems are pricey, and that often the driver is responsible for paying for their installation. If a driver can demonstrate that they have an important need to drive, they may be granted an occupational or essential needs license after having their license suspended for DUI. This could involve getting to work or school, when no other means of transportation are available, or taking a member of the family to important appointments. Only the uses specified on the license are allowed for drivers with licenses for critical needs. Their license will be suspended if they are observed operating a vehicle for any other reason. Drivers with very serious or repeated DWI offenses typically are not eligible for occupational or essential needs licenses. The problem of drunk driving. Currently, driving while under the influence of alcohol or drugs results in the deaths of about 10,000 individuals every year in the United States. Even though drunk driving is a major problem in our country, looking back over the years shows how far we have come in combating the problem. Even though they are painful, wasteful, and avoidable, 10,000 deaths pale in comparison to earlier national death tolls. Before the national minimum drinking age was established and the present BAC level was set, the prevalence of drunk driving increased to the point where 6 out of every 10 traffic fatalities were caused by inebriated drivers. We did not always have the protection of the alcohol laws that we take for granted today. In fact, the necessary legal changes to safeguard U.S. road users from the effects of alcohol intoxication needed the better part of a century, multiple campaigns, and hundreds of thousands of needless deaths. The issue is still far from being solved. After this introduction, we examine the overall picture of the epidemic of drunk driving. Learn about the history of drunk driving and how alcohol and drug impairment enhance the risk on the road. Driving while intoxicated costs. We then examine the human cost and economic effects of drunk driving. Who are the 10,000 unintentionally killed innocent victims of drunk driving? Alcohol impairment makes operating a vehicle dangerous, and it is equivalent to writing your own death sentence. The drunk drivers who cause the accidents account for a large portion of the fatalities. Tragically, they frequently carry utterly uninvolved and normal road users with them. Children, the elderly, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists are commonly the victims of drunk driving accidents, as are other vulnerable road users. Dozens more lives are permanently destroyed for every individual killed in a drunk driving accident. Driving under the influence puts someone else's mother, father, siblings, best friend, wife, husband, or child at danger. In some accidents involving intoxicated drivers, entire families perish. Despite the fact that we hear about these tragedies on the news almost every day, millions of people continue to drive while impaired by alcohol. No driver thinks it will happen to them, but if they drive while inebriated, it may and will. Every pillar of our society is weakened and infected by the epidemic of drunk driving. Imagine how many more individuals are hurt, traumatized, or financially ruinous as a result of collisions involving alcohol if 10,000 or more people per year are murdered. The problem size is virtually incomprehensible. The United States loses billions of dollars annually due to drunk driving, and that's before we even consider the effects on happiness and well-being. Knowledge of DUI and DWI legislation. Your driver's education course must include information on DUI laws and punishments. This video section covers everything you need to know about the legal repercussions of driving while intoxicated, allowing you to make an informed decision should you decide to drink and drive. We begin by dissecting the language used to refer to drunk driving offenses. Is there a distinction between DUI and DWI? Depending on the state where the crime was done, driving under the influence and driving while inebriated might relate to various offenses. In our complete lesson on this subject, we give some examples of how the two names differ in various states. In some states, the terms DUI and DWI are used to refer to the same criminal offense. More details on DUI and DWI offenses, and related penalties, in your state can be found in your driver's manual and on the DMV website. DUI and DWI laws, penalties, and consequences, impaired driving, Part 3. The laws of implicit consent. Refusing to submit to a breathalyzer test if you are stopped by the police on suspicion of drunk driving will not exempt you from prosecution. In fact, it's possible that it will result in greater penalties. Since you agreed under legal obligation to support initiatives to combat drunk driving when you filed your driver's license application paperwork, refusing a BAC test is a crime in and of itself. You impliedly consented to future BAC testing by signing your name on the dotted line, either physically or electronically. Although the implied consent statute is used in every state, there are significant regional differences in the penalty for breaking it. You won't be protected in court if your blood alcohol level wasn't measured because the arresting officer's testimony alone can result in a DWI conviction. Your refusal to take the test will only increase suspicions that you are guilty. Additionally, there is a very good probability that the officer who makes the arrest will get a warrant authorizing them to do a BAC test under duress. Adverse effects of intoxicated driving. If someone drives after drinking, several different undesirable outcomes are possible. Even if you are able to drive intoxicated and escape any immediate consequences, such as arrest, a collision, or death, you will still be worse off than you were before the crime. According to research, the average drunk driver has driven while intoxicated several times before being apprehended. Being able to get away with it once will give you a false sense of security and increase your likelihood of drinking and driving again. Every time you drive while intoxicated, you move closer to these additional likely outcomes. 1. Criminal history. You might not be able to acquire your ideal career or be accepted to your top college if you have a DUI on your record. 2. Exclusion from society. When they learn about the crime, your friends, family, and neighbors could regard you differently. 3. Financial collapse. Convictions for DWI are expensive. Your court case might cost up to $20,000, not including injury or property damage compensation. 4. Serious damage. If you are hurt in a drunk driving accident, you could sustain life-altering injuries or disabilities. 5. Death. Accidents involving drunk driving are frequently fatal. The victims typically pass away in agonizing, tragic ways. Of course, if you decide to drink and drive, you won't be the only one who suffers. If you get into an accident, there is a very substantial risk that you will hurt, kill, or cause significant inconvenience to other people. Even if that is not the case, your actions will nevertheless have a detrimental impact on a great number of other people, including your friends, family, the community at large, police officers, and other innocent motorists who are in the area at the time of the incident. While you drink and drive when you are a young, inexperienced driver, the consequences can be very catastrophic. Teenagers are already much more likely than older drivers to be involved in a fatal crash. Alcohol impairment often has fatal implications when added to that danger. Facts and risks of teenage drinking. Given that they make up only approximately 5% of all licensed drivers in the nation, young individuals aged 15 to 20 are disproportionately responsible for a disproportionately high number of fatal traffic crashes, according to national crash data. Teenagers are more likely to, because they lack driving experience, have imperfect vehicle control skills, and a propensity for risk-taking behavior. After drinking, one is more inclined to operate a vehicle. More likely to perish in an accident caused by alcohol. Give alcohol the wide berth it deserves if you plan to survive past the age of 21. It is all too simple to convince yourself that you are fine to drive after having a few drinks. There will never be a good reason to drive after drinking alcohol, regardless of how few miles are involved in the trip home or how quickly you need to go somewhere. Some distressing data and startling information on how common teenage drunk driving is throughout the United States is included in our entire module on the factors influencing underage drinking. We also examine some of the primary causes of young people's alcohol consumption, despite the fact that it is a prohibited and harmful habit. You can stay out of the alcohol trap by realizing that these reasons are actually myths. In the United States, young people are frequently presented with temptations to drive after drinking. Alcohol is practically always present during social gatherings. You will eventually find yourself in a situation where you consider driving after drinking, unless you leave your car at home, hide your keys, or never drink again. It's crucial to keep in mind that you don't have to drive while intoxicated in these circumstances. In actuality, it shouldn't be included anywhere on your list of possibilities. The alternative to drunk driving is to take a cab, use public transportation, stay at a friend's house, or even sleep in a bus shelter. This video lesson includes 7 strategies for avoiding drunk driving that every driver should be aware of. This knowledge might one day save your life. DUI and DWI laws, penalties, and consequences, impaired driving, Part 4. Zero tolerance drinking rules for teens. Unlike adults, who are permitted to drive with a blood alcohol level as low as 0.08%, drivers under the age of 21 have much lower blood alcohol limits. Any measurable level of alcohol in your blood while driving will result in an arrest and a DUI charge in many states. Thanks to zero tolerance rules, the legal blood alcohol content (BAC) limit for people under 21 varies across the nation from 0.00% to 0.02%. A kid who is detained for DWI will also be charged with alcohol possession and use. It is important to remember this. In the majority of states, it is illegal for anybody under 21 to lawfully consume or possess alcohol unless certain conditions are met. There are a few states where anyone under 21 is never allowed to own or consume alcohol. This essential lesson on zero tolerance regulations has all the information you require on teen alcohol laws, underage drinking penalties, and DUI penalties for people under 21. Although we've listed a number of state-specific alcohol rules, make sure to check your driving manual if your state isn't one of them. In this area, you will also find details on relevant alcohol legislation, such as 1. Open container rules. 2. Penalty for using a fake ID. 3. Providing alcohol to a minor. Alcohol service and handling age restrictions. Do restrictions against alcohol prevent drunk driving? It is simple to forget that we have made progress when hundreds of people continue to perish annually as a result of drunk driving collisions. Why do so many people continue to drive while intoxicated if drink driving laws and alcohol regulations are effective? We may be assured that strict alcohol rules and regulations do, to some extent, deter drunk driving. Hundreds of thousands of lives have been spared in just the last 20 years alone as a result of significant improvements in alcohol legislation, such as raising the legal drinking age and decreasing the per se BAC level. People still drinking and driving just proves that drunk driving prevention policies in the US haven't been fine-tuned. Limiting alcohol consumption generally is a powerful tool against drunk driving. The lowest incidence of fatal drink driving accidents occur in the states with strict alcohol restrictions and lower binge drinking habits. You are protected by alcohol laws, and they are effective as long as you abide by them. A zero-tolerance way of life. Do not drink if you are under 21 years old or otherwise ineligible to legally consume alcohol. Even if you don't drive while intoxicated, illegal alcohol intake and possession have substantial repercussions. Additionally, abstaining from alcohol completely is the best way to ensure that you won't make a poor decision and drive while intoxicated. The greatest way to prevent drunk driving is to practice a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to alcohol use. Avoid the misconception that giving up alcohol will somehow make your life less fulfilling. Alcohol consumption only results in ill health, poor academic performance, limited professional opportunities, embarrassment, remorse, and hangovers. By making the decision to abstain from alcohol and other drugs, you will be in good physical and mental health and able to fully enjoy life. Our final discussion explains how to enjoy your sobriety and avoid the social pressures that initially drive many to drink. We also go through precautions you can take to prevent drinking and driving and other risks associated with alcohol consumption. These consist of being a sober driver, or being driven by one, and being on the lookout for alcohol poisoning. If you've had a drink and don't have a designated driver, there are other options besides driving. How to recognize other drivers who are drunk at the wheel. Prior to entering into any circumstance that can contain alcohol, it is crucial to prepare oneself with this knowledge. The repercussions of not adopting anti-drinking and driving strategies can be fatal, as you will soon discover. Keep in mind that hundreds of drivers and passengers lose their lives each year in alcohol-related car accidents, yet the majority of them never thought it would happen to them. Let's now step back and consider the overall picture.